Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, August 14th. It's slightly after 1 o'clock, and that means it's time for one of Western Liberty Network's Saturday sessions to take place every Saturday at this time, 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Today we have Cleon Cox of Toastmasters, who's going to talk to us about the organization, how it works, how you can get involved. And before we get started with Cleon, I'm going to share the screen and go through a couple of really quick preliminaries here.
You think?
Okay. Okay, what we're looking at here is Western Liberty Network's website. You can go to westernlibertynetwork.org and you can see the website anytime. Here you see Cleon doing his thing and the Toastmasters as we're advertising the session that you're taking part in now. You can look at other things by scrolling down and see what Western Liberty Network is busy doing. Next week, we actually have Steve Moore is going to be joining us to give us an update on what's going on in DC. If you want to take a look at our training facilities, you can go to our training tab. And here, if you scroll down, you can see all the different documents that we have available for download. There's a lot you can learn by looking over these documents. These over here are pictures of different WLN events over the years. And down here, you can watch the training videos like the one we're doing right now. You can go find the topic that you're interested in, and you can play it anytime you like. This video will be posted no later than Tuesday, and it'll be found right here where this one is that I'm pointing at now. And if those of you watching the recording like what you see, you can always go to the WLN support page and provide a tax-deductible contribution. Down this column, you can make one-time contributions. Down this column, you can make automatic recurring monthly contributions. Both can, you can use PayPal, an electronic check, or any major credit card or debit card. So that is what is available there. Now I'm coming out of the screen sharing, and one thing I want to make very clear is that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization. That means we are nonpartisan. We do not endorse any candidate, political party, legislation, or ballot measure. What we do is we train grassroots activists and provide training resources to them so that they can use the things that they care about. Western Liberty Network generally supports limited government, but we do not endorse candidates. That is the job of everyone here, and the statements of our guests and participants are solely their own responsibility. And so with that, I'm going to turn the platform over to Cleon Cox, who is a leading member of Toastmasters International. He's been active at the national, state, and local fronts, and he's going to tell us about the organization. So I turn it over to you, Cleon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate that. And welcome to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much.
So since it's now, are you currently a Toastmaster, Lucy?
No, I'm taking a break. I'm waiting for things to get back to normal so that we can do in person. The Zoom meetings, they're not conducive at all to me as far as a speaking platform within Toastmasters.
Okay, I understand. There's mixed feelings from all over the place, all over the world, actually. So since there's at this present time nobody here, it's okay with you, just get to know you a little bit more as to
Sure.
How long have you been in Toastmasters?
I was in just under 12 years in Central Oregon.
Oh, okay. In Bend, Redmond?
In Bend, with the Bend High Nooners.
Okay, you probably knew Pat.
Oh,
Lynch?
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, she isn't. I haven't seen her in so long now.
Yeah.
She's a sweetheart. She really worked hard over there.
She did, yes.
So anyway, so you're in the Bend area. And out of curiosity, what got you into Toastmasters?
Well, I went back to college at the ripe age of 39.
Okay.
And I finished, and I was told by my advisor that I absolutely had to take Speech 101 to graduate. And I said, no, I can't do that because I've always have had this deathly fear of public speaking. He says, well, then you don't want to graduate, do you? I says, yeah, I do. I said, I'll take calculus, I'll take anything, but not speech. He says, well, then you might as well just quit. And I said, no,
Ooh.
So I took speech, and before class ever started, I went to set up a time to meet with both professors because I thought, I'm going to get over this fear of public speaking. And I met them, Wes Hervey and Paul King, and two different speech classes. One was interpersonal communications, the other one was speech 101. I thought, so I talked to both, and they were amazing. And they said, you and about 95% of the population have this fear. So we'll work with you. And boy, did they. And I was so impressed with their willingness to help me, who got sick to my stomach just at the thought of public speaking,
Oh, yeah.
that I ended up with A's in both classes. I took 2 more speech courses. I changed my major to communications, and they told me, watch out, world, you should really, really go to Toastmasters so that you seem to have this gift at public speaking now. Toastmasters would be a great fit. And the rest is history. I went from speaking in front of a classroom of 30 at the most to 1,500 at rallies.
Wonderful. So let me step in to do the part that Rich, I guess, wanted me to share with people for the recording portion. That is, what is Toastmasters, what it's about, why would you want to hear about it? So once again, I'm Cleon Cox, and I've been doing Toastmasters for the past 27 years. And what does that say? It just means that I continue to learn. Sometimes people ask me, after that long, haven't you learned? And it's like anything else, any profession, any look of actors and singers and musicians, they're always practicing to get better. And that's the game to me. The other thing is what it can do for folks. And to start off with, if people are interested in joining Toastmasters, you can visit for free. You can actually visit for free as long as you want, but you won't be able to participate much, but you can see what goes on. You can find clubs at toastmasters.org, and then you can click on the button that says find a club. And some of the clubs are on Zoom and some aren't, and some of them are not meeting. I don't know how many, but Toastmasters has been around since 1924, so it's getting close to 100 years. It's throughout the world in 143 countries. And the last time I looked, but I'm sure there's not that many right now, but there's over 16,000 clubs all over the world. So you have a big choice. The ironic part right now with what the pandemic did was we can visit clubs all over the world. Not every club, because some clubs aren't doing Zoom, but most clubs, many clubs are doing that. And so we have people who are international members now. I have 2 clubs in which we have people from overseas. So what is Toastmasters? Why does it benefit us? Well, as Lucy and I were talking earlier, and she talked about her complete fear, and that's not uncommon. The interesting part about Toastmasters is you find it's a very supportive environment. When people speak, there's 3 main parts to a Toastmasters meeting. There's the prepared speakers. Number 2, there is the evaluations. Everything is evaluated, and I'll talk more about that. And then thirdly, there's impromptu speaking, otherwise known as table topics. That's when people ask you a question that you hadn't even thought of, or you hadn't even heard of, or you wonder, like, where did they get that? And then how do you speak to that? So those are the 3 main components. Now, the learning portion, I have found the largest learning skill that we grow in ourselves is our listening skills. And you might say, well, I thought it was all about speaking. Well, it is. It's all about communication and leadership skills. And both of those skills are needed in everything we do in life today. People say, well, I'm not a leader. Well, we're all leaders someplace. And if we're not the leader, then we're going to be a follower. We're going to be somebody that's working with or for a leader. And it's good to know what's expected of them so that you can help them be the best as long as you're going to be with them. The other piece, especially in the foray of those of you that are out there who want to make an impact politically or within your community, to talk, because you have to talk to people. You may even have to stand up at a meeting someplace, introduce yourself, or give your point of view. And where people have a problem is their self-confidence needs to be raised higher. We've all got some. Some of us have much more, and some of us don't have as much. So it all goes in different increments. But we can learn to grow that, and Toastmasters will definitely help you along with that field. And I can tell by listening to Lucy that that's exactly what happened to her, because she's led rallies and so on. So that means somewhere she overcame it, because she said, I would die before I get in front of a group of people. And that's a very common phrase from some people. Not all. Some people want to. I know several people who were professional speakers who later on joined Toastmasters to even improve their speaking more. People want to get better than what they're currently doing. So they come there to learn, because it's not a place to where, when we evaluate, my job is not to sit there and pick you apart and tell you everything you did wrong. My job is to tell you what you did well. What caught my attention? What did I think you did? What did I hear from you that I thought was done extremely well? And then give you some feedback on something else that you might have done that I thought, maybe if you would improve this portion. And I wouldn't say improve. What I would talk about would be, I noticed when you were speaking, you were giving us a lot of information. And what I noticed in that information, at times it was hard for me to hear you. So I was thinking, as you speak, if you begin to raise your voice a little bit, that would make it easier for me and the audience to listen to you. So you give nice information back and you praise them. It's got to be truthful praise. And you learn that through evaluations. And then the third part is table topics. That's when somebody asks you the question off the wall. I work with people who are unemployed, and they tell me all the time, seems like one of the biggest questions that many people, if not most, really don't like at all, is that when they get into the interview, they've gotten to an interview now, and the person sits back in their chair and says, well, tell me about yourself. And they say, I hate that question. And I'm sitting there going like, I love that question, because I can go anywhere I want with it, unless you've guided me down. So tell me about yourself with regards to your work habits or background or where you come from. And at that point, then I have to direct it to that, which I can do that. The other piece to remember when it comes to impromptu speaking, you have so much knowledge right here, so much in this head. The game is, can you get it out when you want to? My observations are, when people have, whether it's an interview or if they're working and the boss calls you in and says, Cleon, would you come in here? The board needs to know this, or this team needs to know this about what you're doing. And you're thinking, I haven't had time to put it together. But you go in there because the boss asked you to come in. And then you make your delivery. You're pretty upset, you're nervous. And as you walk out the door, many people say to themselves, they say, I know what I should have said, which tells me you already had the answer, but you didn't know it. When people ask questions, many times your brain shoots the answer down. And where we have a problem is within split parts of a second, we are sitting here arguing with ourselves and fighting. That's not the right story. No, I don't want to tell them that. Oh, no, I don't want to. And we go back and forth. And within the split second, we're going like, but I got to tell them something. And we tell them something. We will change it. Whereas the piece that our brain shot down to us, all the files are attached to it, and you can get it and run with it. And if the listeners don't want to hear that, they will tell you, excuse me, I thought you were going to talk about next Monday, not Thursday, or whatever it might be. So in Toastmasters, just by going, listening to others, working on your projects, will help you to grow and to take it to the next step. And you will continue to grow some more. And that's the fun part of Toastmasters. You will learn from people about Toastmasters. You will find out about speeches. You'll talk about different information, and you'll find that it works out very well. So you're wondering, so where should we go? So Lucy, you're still with me?
Yes, I am.
So from your perspective, what do you feel is what one or two big pieces of information do you feel that you learned through Toastmasters?
Okay. Well, first, you can learn how to articulate on, let's say the issue is today's ongoing discussions about the effectiveness of public speaking in the town square. And it's pretty hot right now, as you know. And unfortunately, sometimes people who are even on your side of the aisle, and I'm not talking political party, but just in general, but people on your side of the aisle, that they have the ideas, they have the background possibly to speak on a certain issue. Yet when they come to the floor, they just go on raw emotion and say things that they regret later. And the big takeaway for me in Toastmaster, one of the top two, is the ability you learn how to articulate your ideas and to do it in an effective fashion. And then secondly, and this goes way back to when those two professors helped me at college with my first speech classes, is dealing with nervousness. You learn, even as you're speaking, when you're at the lectern, you learn with every time you do it. And even though I've been doing this for years now, those butterflies can easily reemerge. And what I like to say is you learn how to deal with those butterflies in an orderly fashion so that they're in sync with you. And I know that sounds kind of convoluted, but you learn that let nervousness work for you, not against you. And if you're tired, you're hungry, you little distractions of people in the way back making funny faces at you, and I'm being somewhat facetious there, but you know what I'm talking about, all the distractions that come up as you're speaking. You learn to block those out. You learn to overcome that nervousness with every single time you're speaking in front of a group, even if it's a very small group. And I think to this day, I'm still learning. And one way I do that is by watching excellent speakers, in my view. I just learned something every time. And my greatest inspiration easily was the late Dr. Greg Bonson, who was one of the most amazing speakers I ever heard and a master at debate. He was my pastor in the 80s and early 90s. Sadly, he passed away quite some time ago. And I remember studying him as whether he was teaching or preaching or at a conference or what have you. And so I made it a point to study very good speakers.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's great. You did a wonderful job. And for anybody who is listening to this, watching it later on, Lucy and I, this is the first time we've ever met. So in other words, I asked her a question. That's what we call impromptu speaking. And then she just ran with it and did what she did. So I appreciate what you fed in there on how important it is. And then the other piece is when you're out, if you're trying to make a point with people, whether you want to debate with them and so on, the game is you have to sound confident. You have to have a good sounding voice so that they can hear you. This is handy. And that sound of confidence will come through in your voice as you speak. There's many aspects to that. You know, what does it sound like? Well, each of us might have a different definition. But the point is when you sound confident, people tend to believe you more so. Whether they like what you're saying or not, they can listen to that. I mentioned earlier that one of the largest skills, if not the biggest skill that we learn and grow in Toastmasters and can monitor ourselves is our listening skills. And that's so important. We have to listen intently. When we listen, we're not coming up with our next retort or debate or whatever. It's to listen in totality so that we know what was said or asked of us. In my work with people who are looking to get back into the work world in their career, it's interesting. I've had people over the past 30 years will say that they really blew their interview. And I go, well, what's that about? What happened? And they talk about when the person began to talk with them and ask them a question, they heard the beginning of it and they thought, oh, I know where the question's going. And they began to conjure up their answer. And they're working away on it. And now they're not listening to the other person who's asking the question. And then when the person stops talking and asking the question, they begin to come back and start telling what their answer is. And within a few minutes, the person says, but that's not what I asked you. And of course, they're highly embarrassed now. Oh, well, what did you ask me? Which means that they weren't listening because they were looking to respond. They wanted to come back with a perfect answer, which I understand that. So the game is, how can I do that? Sometimes we fear that if we don't speak soon enough, I'll forget what my question is. And that's when note taking comes in handy. You can make a note. The other part I can tell you is practice and time doing this is what's helpful. And because you can have that recall to come back to you, and you can then formulate your answers. And you can even ask questions of the person if that was the case. So the skills in Toastmasters is not designed for debating per se. It's designed for listening, communicating, talking to people, because if you're going to put the time in to talk, you want them to listen to you, and then you want them to pay attention and then have a conversation with you. To me, that's what works better than yelling and screaming, that's for sure. But it takes time and just practice, and Toastmasters is the place to practice. You will practice just any speech, how to plant a garden, how to raise children, whatever it might be. Sometimes people ask, well, I thought maybe Toastmasters, I've heard that you can't talk about two different things. One is politics and one is religion. That's not quite true. You can talk about anything you want. If I was evaluating you, the only time that I would talk about your content is if I felt the content that you had was inappropriate for the audience listening. That really gets to a narrow field, but you can talk about whatever you want. And then when you're speaking, the audience in Toastmasters isn't there to go like, hey, wait a minute, no, that's wrong. No, I don't agree with that. Let me tell you, the audience listens the whole time. And when you're done, your evaluation, you're not really evaluating on your content, with the exception of what I just told you. And that is, I might mention that I felt that the information, what you talked about was inappropriate. Otherwise, you're free to speak. Whether I agree or not doesn't matter. How did you deliver it? That's what is evaluated. And then on the evaluation I told you about, in a club meeting, you have somebody who is the Toastmaster for the day, or roughly the hour. They direct the meeting. They're the conductor. You have some prepared speakers. Each speaker has an evaluator, and the evaluator will evaluate your speech for somebody. You also have a grammarian, which is great because you learn more words. You learn about getting your words out properly. That's good. Articulation. So the Toastmasters is a place that you're going to learn some more. You're going to hear different topics. So you have speaking, you have evaluations, and then there's a general evaluator who evaluates all the evaluators. Give them feedback on how their evaluation was done. The same as I mentioned earlier, and that is the evaluation says, this is what I really heard this, I saw this, I really like this. And here's an idea how it might even be better. And that will help you to grow your skills even more. The evaluations are the crux of all this learning piece. So you hear different information. It's just amazing how what we learn of not just speaking, but listening, or sometimes the stories that people tell. Humans like stories. So Toastmasters is the place. I mean, there is a club I can think of here in the Portland area, and it's called Tell Me a Story. But there's different clubs all over the world. Like I said, there were 16,000 clubs. They have different topics, you might call it. Sometimes whether it's tell me a story, whether it's how to be a professional speaker, whatever it might be. So keep that in mind. In this world here with Western leadership, you can use those skills. Stop and take a look at the people that interest you when they're speaking. Pay attention to them. Sometimes you may have heard something about an ah counter or counter. Yes. And what's wrong with those words? It's because they're distractions. So that's why we want to cut it out so that we don't have a distraction, so that people will listen to you and they would gain some knowledge and move forward. So Lucy.
Yes.
So so a lot of what you heard today from me, so you listened, you gave some great feedback. I really like the feedback. So what else can I do to help, or what can you do to help me?
Well, I love networking, and I love especially bringing people together that whether they want to be a better writer or take a stab at speaking for the first time, or they're finally at a point in their life that they have time. I have a friend that's a recent empty nester, and there's all this talent out there. Everybody's got a talent, every single person. Some have several obvious, some have not as obvious, but they're like buried. And I think it's really important within Toastmasters or anybody engaged in the speaking field is that realize that out there, there's just a ton of people who could benefit from what you've done within Toastmasters and the different areas, whether it's your jobs or volunteer work like myself, that you've utilized that skill. And I'm so glad that you super emphasized listening skills, because this is sadly lacking almost anywhere you go. People are so preoccupied with what they want to say that they don't slow down and listen intently. There's a Toastmaster you might remember named Robert Killen.
Oh, yes.
He was an excellent speaker.
In Eugene now.
Yes, in Eugene now, and he had 3 little boys when I met him.
Yep.
And he said something in one of the very first visits I had to Toastmasters about, he said, remember that you're having a conversation and the jitters will take care of themselves if you look at it as make it a conversation. And another thing that comes to mind going to those early meetings, and you touched on it, about the benefits of impromptu. And that was my biggest fear within Toastmasters that first year or so, was I thought, I can never, ever do that. Please, please don't ever ask me. Well, as you know, Toastmasters is such a supportive environment. And if they know you're relatively new, no one's going to put you on the spot. So after I'd been going for a few months, I was asked, but then at the same time, the person who was the impromptu leader said, If you're not quite ready for this, that's okay." And so I passed the few times I was asked. And after I'd been in Toastmasters close to 6 months, I thought, next time I ask, I need to just do this. And I did. And I thought, wow, that it's 1 to 2 minutes. I thought that was a very fast 2 minutes. I thought, I I kind of like this. Well, over the course of almost 12 years, I ratcheted up probably 40 impromptu speeches. And a very wise, seasoned speaker within our group years ago said, always have a few pocket speeches, he called them. At least 3 things that you could talk about at the tip of a hat for 1 to 2 minutes.
Right.
And I always remembered that. And it could be your first pet, it could be something about your favorite book, or for me, it was my favorite 12-inch LP, which I know you two gentlemen know, those old-fashioned 33 and a third RPM records. And so you actually find out, you know what? Not only is this enjoyable, I'm having fun with it. And so the value of impromptu is a skill that I would encourage anybody looking into public speaking, that they zero in on that, because it's going to help you whether you're in a crowded room and you're asked out of the blue a question, or you're doing a Q&A, or you're on some kind of a panel, and someone says, hey, I'd like you to speak a couple minutes on this last point that was made. And you're on the spot. And if you've got that skill, you'll nail it. So I hope that was helpful.
That was beautiful. It's so, and you hit all the points. I mean, it's so true. The piece about impromptu is we have so much up here, we don't realize it. But when somebody is, many times people will freeze when they're asked right now, tell me about this. And because there's a fear factor, it's like it puts a wall up in the brain, you can't find it. But as soon as you're done, the pressure's off. Then you go like, I know what I should have said.
Yeah.
And so that's taught me that we all have the answer. When people come to my support group over the years, and I'll say, I don't have to teach you anything because you have all the answers. And they're like, well, if I have all the answers, why aren't I back to work? Well, because you haven't talked to enough people yet. You haven't learned enough from others, etc. Plus, you have to make some changes about you. So all of that comes into play here. And if you're going to be out there, whether you're in a group, a large group or whatever, but the ability to communicate with other people is so big. And in this world, whether we like it or not, politics is a big part. I don't care what side you're on, it's a very big part about getting things done. And as I get older, I keep running into things I'm thinking like, this is just too political, but it's there. And what are we going to do about it? How can we talk to other people and not call them names, tell them how stupid they are or something, because from our perspective it is. You have to remember that they have their own feelings, whether you don't know where they derive them from. It doesn't really matter. Have a meaningful conversation. Robert Killen is a good friend of mine, and I respect the devil out of him. He is so good, and his calmness, just people who have that calmness always amaze me. I remember when he didn't become the world champion, but he was up there at the top. So I really enjoy his speaking.
Yeah.
And he was so true. Have a conversation. And that works in business too. If you're in business, there's a young man that I know that went to college. He came out, he went to work, he became an insurance salesman. He's a nice young fella, and he just happens to have a way with people. He likes them. And after he'd been in the business, he's actually in the company he's in is a very large company, but he really has risen up. And we were talking one day, and he told me, he says, you know what I've learned about my business and what I want to do and so on and sell? I said, tell me about it. And he says, all I want to do is have a conversation with people. Yes, I would like to sell them my products, but they're not all ready for it. They're not sure who I am. They don't understand the products. I want to have conversations. And if they like me because I listen to them, paid attention, etc., and maybe even pointed out something, they will tell their friends. They may not buy, but they may tell their friend. And he says, and that's how I'm going to grow my following that way, is to help other people develop what they want. You're not going to sell to everybody. The same thing in this world of just communicating, going to a large meeting, you need to listen to people and pay attention. And then you can get the word out and you talk to people slowly. I've been attending school board meetings for many years. I've learned in the very beginning by just sitting there and listening. I've realized that going to the school board meeting, if you have something you want to bring to the school board, you get 2 to 3 minutes. And I watch people come in with 2 pages of typewritten speech that they want to give. And when I see that, and it's not double spaced or anything, I'm thinking, you're never going to get that in 3 minutes. But I feel bad for them because they get in there because they're mad about something generally. And they get in there and start reading this thing to do, and it's monotone, and you can hear their anger in them, etc. And I'm thinking, wow, they're upset. I understand that. Forget what it is about. And I'm thinking you need to succinctly have it down to a small, you get that 2 to 3 minutes, and then find out how the school board works. I found that most of my work that I've ever done with them is before the meeting starts or after the meeting's over, because you just can't pipe up in the audience and say, hey, I want to say something. You have to sign a card saying I want to talk, and then there's a certain period you get to talk in. So it's kind of tough at first because you hear something and you're like, oh, no, that's not right. But it's because they need to get through the meeting. I understand that part. Otherwise, the meetings will never end. So we learn how to compile what we want to say in a short amount. If you want to really test yourself, go and call into a radio talk show. So many times I've called in, and while I'm listening, they've got 3 other topics I want to talk about. But what I've learned is, no, it's not going to work. If I'm going to speak, I have to do it slow enough for them to articulate and let them hear it, and then be done with it then. Because they have a job, that is to get as many people in and have a brief conversation with you and move on to the next person. And radio talk shows are good. You learn a lot from them. I enjoy listening to some of them, not all of them, but I like to listen to them to hear what we're talking about. The news itself anymore isn't, they're taught how to get up there and broadcast and speak, but they have a script pretty much they're following. A lot of the meetings that we go to don't have scripts. So Toastmasters is something that people can utilize for growth, to be heard, to listen, to learn. In my opinion, it's a place that you can expand your knowledge, and you never know who you're going to influence. Because many times, nobody comes up to you. I mean, many people don't come up to you and say, hey, that was great. I learned something from that. I'm going to go do this. You don't always hear that, but you never know when you're going to influence others in the manner that you're talking about, or just give them something to think about. You don't have to, and for me, I don't have to have your answer right now. That, by golly, Cleon, you're right. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go vote for. Many people, human nature doesn't let us do that sometimes. So just be out there calm, speaking, sharing, showing the evidence, and then sit back and listen. That's what you do. So Toastmasters will help you do that. You get to go every week and practice. we're talking about something that costs you maybe just $110 per year. So it's not a big expensive thing. We meet every week. They're all over. I don't care where you're located. You can go to toastmasters.org and then hit the button that Richard put up earlier on here. Find club. You can go in there, sort down, put in your zip code, and it'll tell you where they are. And from that point on, you can visit the clubs. When we get back to in-person meetings, of course you can visit all the ones around you. But right now, many of the clubs, not all, but many of the clubs are on Zoom. And like I say, I've visited clubs all over the world, and I've had people come and visit us from all over the world. And that has been extremely enlightening to hear them and where they come from and what it is, because all the clubs do basically the same thing, maybe a different order, but it's pretty much the same. And then we all of us that have been in Toastmasters wind up learning little things, little pieces like, oh, I didn't think about that before. I might want to try that in my club. So it's a learning proposition all the time. And like I say, you can go free. You won't be able to do as much you won't be asked to do a speech. When you first join, they just want to know, who are you and why are you here? And you tell them why. Briefly, just tell them, and then listen, sit back and watch and listen. So with that, we wrap that part up. Any questions from you, Richard? You've heard me before.
I don't have any questions. I've known about Toastmasters for a long time. My father was a Toastmaster for many years, and I've been to some Toastmasters meeting, although I haven't joined yet. I'm trying to find a way to, work that into my schedule, the way I move around so much. But there's always a way, and I'll find it.
Well, right now on Zoom, you can do it.
That's right. It's easy. It's easy on Zoom. I'm kind of waiting for this whole virus Zoom era to go away. I really like dealing with people face to face.
Right.
But that's fine. One more time, I'm going to put this website for people to look at. This is the website where you can find out where your nearest club is. And as Cleon said, there are over 16,000 Toastmasters groups around the country. And there's one I know in the Portland metro area. There are a bunch of them, and they're also scattered all over the state. If you are an activist who wants to be impactful in your community, if you want to be a local opinion leader, if you want to convince people to sign petitions, if you want to run for local office, all of these things, your suite of preparations are incomplete if you're not improving yourself as a public speaker, or if not a public speaker, your ability to communicate ideas to the people that you're trying to persuade, the people that you're trying to bring along. And I cannot think of anything that is better and more affordable for the average person than to join and participate in a Toastmasters Club. And that's why I thought it was important to do this recording. And for those of you who are watching this on the recording, just go to www.toastmasters.org and you can select their Find a Club. You can learn more about the organization. And of course, to find out about Western Liberty Network and the various training resources we have, you can go to westernlibertynetwork.org and click on the training tab in order to find out what's available. And those things are all available free of charge. Cleon, Lucy, do you have anything else for the good of the order today?
Yeah, a question for each one of you. Cleon, is there a club up your way called Liberty Speakers or Talkers?
Liberty Talkers. I started that club years ago, and it's still in operation. It used to have a theme to it. It was a political theme, but they've gone away from that because many of the people that started in there, they moved on to other things, different, whether they're in the local area or not. And so it's a standard club, but they're open to that.
Okay.
So you have Liberty Talkers. You also have the Portland Progressives on the east side of Portland that are the other side. They're the Libertarians, which I actually helped start that because the people came to me and said, I want to start a club. And so that's fine. And so we started, and they're still, and they've been around for, I know, for over 10 years. I believe Liberty Talkers has almost been around 10 years too. So yes, there are those two different clubs.
That's great. And I wanted to tell you that just 4 years ago, I decided to take a stab at entering a contest, and I went up the ranks and was able to go to the Portland area to compete with, I think, 8 or 9 other people from around the state. And it was an amazing experience. I'd highly recommend it to anybody once they get comfortable with Toastmasters, even if they just want to do it at the local level. It's just an amazing experience. And then I had a question for Rich.
Sure.
You mentioned that you will get today's Zoom meeting on your website by Tuesday.
Yeah,
Any
although
chance?
it'll actually be up today. I've
Oh,
found out I
great.
have more time than I thought today, so I'm going to stay in the office and make sure it goes up immediately.
That's great, because I wanted to share it with the group I'm meeting with this coming Tuesday, and fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
Well, thank you, Lucy. I appreciate that very much. And you're right. Many times people say, compete. Why would I even do that? Don't worry about it. Once you get in, some people will compete, some won't. But it's all about learning, isn't it, Lucy?
Yes.
Taking that next step, and then all of a sudden you see a whole new side to you and to others. And then it also, when you're competing, you're in front of a group right there, standing in front, and many of the people you've never seen before in your life. I'm sure you saw that.
Yes.
You're going like, is there anybody here from Bend? I don't know anybody here. And then you compete. So it gives you a whole new opening. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I didn't know anybody in the audience of about maybe 150 people, except my sister and her husband that came from Beaverton to hear me. And I'm not going to tell you what the speech was about, but you'll guess after I just give the title. It was called "There's a Mouse in the House." And that's it. I'm not going to say anything more.
Wonderful.
But had a blast.
That's so great.
And remember to people watching the recording out there that nobody is expecting, and you should not expect yourself to be the next Morgan Freeman or somebody like that that's just an incredible orator. If you are able to rise to that level of oration and public speaking, by all means, go for it. But the important thing is to be able to communicate your ideas to other people so that they can understand it and so that you're communicating clearly. And Toastmasters is a wonderful way to learn how to do that, see other people develop yourself, and really acquire those skills.
All right, thank you, Rich. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed myself, and it's been great. And I really lucked out having Lucy there. I may have seen her. I can't remember. I see so many people in my life.
Yeah.
But this is great. I'm going to remember Lucy because it's just wonderful on how she was able to just expound upon it and tell it as it is. And because I've never.
Hi there.
And there she is.
There she is.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Cleon, for giving us your time on a Saturday, and Lucy, who's a fantastic activist and a good friend. Thank you for signing on. So hopefully we'll see folks next Saturday at 1 o'clock when we'll have Stephen Moore, former senior economic advisor for Donald Trump. So take care. God bless.
Thank you very much.